Dear viewers, welcome to Radio Metro Mail. You are watching Catch Up and I am Imamul Haq, your today's host. In Catch Up, we meet people, those who are interested in politics. Today we have a very special guest with us who is a widely known, respectable researcher, writer and an advocate for social justice. Rima Berns-McGown. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I remember that during your election also you joined us. You discussed many things with us.
Yes. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So welcome to our show formally again from
Thank
Radio
you.
Metro Mail's family.
Thank
So
you.
today we would like to discuss basically about what we discussed in our last conversation. So you mentioned many things. We had a nice chat, interactive chat, where you talked about many issues which is impacting in many ways in the society and the people of this community. We'll talk about that, but before going into that, let's start with the campaign, the election you had, and that was, I believe, the first time you were participating in such kind of election. So what was your experience like, actively participating in the election? And so that would be great if you just share your experience.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I have to say, as you noted, this was the first time I'd ever done this, and as I think I told you before, I never expected to be doing this. And it was about exactly a year ago now that I was asked to consider, and my first response was, no, I'm an academic, I'm an introvert. This is not a thing that I would consider doing. I studied politics. I didn't ever see myself as entering into it
As a politician.
as an actor. And I think I was clear that for me, I would always think of myself as a social justice advocate working in politics as opposed to a politician. And I consider that that's a very important part of the way that I think about myself now. So I think that that's really important. And I have to say that because that was the way that I thought about it, the campaign was actually much more enjoyable than I might have expected. I had Laura Nguyen was my campaign manager, so a young woman of color, and I think that was really important because she set the stage for a really beautiful campaign team. We had a lot of young women of color working on and running the campaign, a lot of women working on the campaign.
That's great.
And so the campaign space felt a very comfortable place. It was in the part of the riding that is very diverse. A lot of people of all different backgrounds walked in off the street and were moved to come and help us out. So it just felt like a beautiful space. And so it was a lot of hard work. I lost a lot of weight. I climbed a lot of stairs, lost my voice, but it was a very positive experience, I have to say. And I got to meet a lot of incredible people who have remained very supportive since the campaign.
Good to know that. So
Yeah.
being a academician, so you came into the political system. So has your perception of politics changed after being elected as an MPP?
It's such a good question. At one level, no, because I'm a nerdy student of politics, right?
Okay.
That's just, and so now what's happening is that I have an upfront, very close and personal view of something that I've always ever viewed and watched from a little bit of a distance. And have to say that my understanding is, I wouldn't say that it's different. I would say that it feels different when you're right in the middle of it. And this is a very interesting time to be this up close and personal, watching everything that's going on at Queen's Park. It's not comfortable. It's not pleasant. We have a very particular leader at the moment who's, I think I think it's always difficult perhaps, but the tone has definitely changed at Queen's Park, and people who've been there for 30 years have said they've never seen anything like this.
Oh.
So it is often, I won't say that I'm surprised by it, but it's not easy to be this close to watching. It's certainly interesting and fascinating, and there's times when I can take a step back and say, just thinking about it from an academic, analytical perspective, it's fascinating to have this up-close view of it. It's not easy.
So that's why I ask you that, because before that you were just teaching, and now you can see things very closely.
Oh boy.
So you said that, you know, the tone at the Queen's Park has changed. What does it mean, in fact? So we just like to, you know about that, how it is different from previous.
Mr. Ford is a very particular leader with a very strong personality and a very strong way of doing things. And he has a large majority and no interest in cooperating with the opposition. So I am an NDP, MPP, so along with Dolly Begum in Scarborough Southwest and 38 other people. So there are 40 of us. We're a large official opposition. And often in the past, there has been a lot of cooperation between the government and the opposition. Obviously, they sit on different sides, but there's been cooperation in terms of how the business of Queen's Park works. That is not happening right now. And the feeling in there is it's very hostile, it's very harsh, it's very sharp, it's their way or no way. And question period it feels very violent to sit through that. It's actually a very deeply awful experience every day. So and they don't cooperate in terms of procedures. A lot of the concerns that I have about this government is that the procedural way of doing things, the kind of, we're all in this together, we might have different perspectives, but we're trying to make it work for people. That stuff isn't there, and that cooperation isn't there. And I think that is not good for democracy, frankly.
Definitely, because we were just thinking that, when you are in the legislative body or assembly, being an Ontarian, we always expect that things will happen or the policy will be, shaped or made through a consultative process.
Exactly.
And when we talk about consultative process, means both opposition and the government members,
exactly,
they should talk about it. They should even listen to us as well, being an Ontarian.
Exactly. So let me give you some examples. For instance, there have been a number of bills. When a bill goes through the legislative process, it is intended to go to committee. And when it goes to committee, that's when you have consultation from, you both get the ideas of the opposition members, so they can say, what if you put this into the bill? That would just make it a little bit better as far as we're concerned. And often those ideas are good ideas. And also you have consultation from Ontarians who are outside the political process. So the bill, for instance, so there are some bills that have been time allocated, which means they haven't gone to committee at all. So there's been no opportunity for outside input. One very important bill that just got pushed through very quickly was Bill 47. And what that was doing was actually undoing labor rights that the previous government had put in that were overdue, that should have been put in a long time ago, but finally just got passed. And this bill was undoing them. Things like clawing back the proposed minimum wage increase to $15 an hour, making sure that didn't happen, getting rid of the 2 days of sick leave, paid sick leave that people were supposed to have, the fact that people were supposed to be, temporary workers were supposed to be paid and treated the same as permanent workers, getting rid of all of that. That went to committee, but literally for 5 hours. So there were some 130 plus groups that wanted to speak. You can't do that in 5 hours. So that meant that they really didn't listen. Never mind, they didn't listen to us in the opposition, but they also didn't listen to Ontarians. So that's the kind of stuff I mean by shredding process.
Well, that is very, very unfortunate to know. I think in democracy there is a saying that the absolute majority sometimes is not good.
No, it
Because
isn't
when
good.
you have the absolute majority, you go like, you take everything granted and you do the way you want to do that. You don't believe in consultation or people's right.
Exactly. And another example, for instance, that the Minister of Community and Social Services just had an announcement on how she was going to revise social assistance, and it was on Thursday.
Yeah.
And I am the official opposition critic for poverty and homelessness. So obviously social assistance and how it is changed directly affects my critic area. They wouldn't let me into the briefing because they have a policy that only one NDP MPP was allowed in, and the critic for social assistance was already in there, so they wouldn't let me in. It's that kind of shutting down. They have briefings where they won't let reporters ask questions. I mean, it's that kind of really fundamentally anti-democratic process that I, as an academic and as an Ontarian, find really disturbing.
That's right. So I think if I just take something from whatever you have said, that I remember during our last conversation in May this year, you mentioned something about the systemic, I have some points from last that you mentioned about that we need to think systemically.
Yes.
And you talked about the equitable public policy. So where do we stand in such an hostile environment, if I say, where do you stand?
Not good. I mean, it's not good. When we talked before, I was expressing why I think that a systemic way of understanding public policy and systemic change in order to ensure that Ontario works for everyone who lives here was really important. And that the fundamental reason that I agreed to run and to be in politics was to put forward on an ongoing basis those ideas. The disturbing thing for me is that although it was never great before, there was often a lot of patchwork thinking and not systemic thinking. It's gotten a lot worse under this government. So one of the things that I find disturbing is it's not just the process with regard to politics, but it's taking away the fundamentals of what makes society work for everybody. Everything from the social assistance net to thinking about, for instance, moving forward with regard to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, which is really critically important. And one of the very first things that this government did was to stop an exercise in rewriting the curriculum for schools that would have incorporated a more thoughtful history of Indigenous peoples in Canada. Like, they did that within a couple of days of taking office. And that sort of stuff is really disappointing. That said, I think that it means that voices like mine are even more important. Definitely. Because every time I have an opportunity, whether it's asking a question or a member statement or putting together a response to something that the minister is doing, or a project that I have in mind that I'd like to talk to you about, it is always to emphasize the ways in which we need to think systemically. So if you think about poverty and homelessness, for instance, what I'm really happy about having a chance to do, and I can do this regardless of whatever nonsense the minister and the government is doing, is to think about the various ways in which poverty and homelessness are affected by things like mental health issues, things like the barriers that are in the way of newcomers to Canada getting good jobs, of racism, of anti-Indigenous racism and Islamophobia, and all of those things. So being able to I can still play that role even from the opposition benches. And so that's something that's really important to me to do.
Definitely. I think the one of the aspect, or one of the important thing we can think of to overcome this kind of situation is that we can try to engage or involve, or we can ensure that more community participation is there in the political process and the decision making process. So I remember that last time you emphasized on those things.
Yeah.
So in order to making sure that the community is more involved in the political process or the policy making system, so what you are doing or what we can do?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I'm really excited about this, and I think there are things that we can do that again become even more urgent, given the way that the government is approaching all these issues. But I'm really excited about it, and we can do it regardless of who's in government. And that I'm really excited that I've been able to put together an amazing team to help me out. Laura Nguyen, Ohana Oliveira, and Amr Khan are all working with me at Queen's Park and in the community office. And our whole goal, so we've just been able to sort of consolidate the office, and our whole goal is to be able to do events in the community to bring people out, to help connect people with ways in which they can express themselves, and to organize to push for the changes that are good for community members. So we are determined to help, even if we're pushing against a government that's sometimes hostile, it's really important for people to see that their community pressure is possible and will make a difference. So that's one thing that we're going to do, and we're going to do it together with Dolly in Scarborough Southwest. We're going to have community town halls. We're going to help people figure out how to organize and how to make very specific demands and how to pressure government.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dear viewers, we are talking to Rima Berns. She is the MPP of Beaches-East York. And she's saying something, or she is sharing her experience, how hostile or is not very friendly environment at this moment in the Queen's Park. So this is definitely alarming, condition for us being an Ontarian. So I remember that last time also during your campaign, we talked about child poverty, we talked about the affordable housing, we talked about education and health. And you were at one point, you were saying that, things are quite failing in this system, things are not working the way it should have worked. So now you have additional responsibility because you are sitting in the Legislative Assembly right now. So you must have some strategy to address all these things. You have your, NDP platform, there are certain things. So you couldn't form the government, but you are in the opposition. So what about those, points that you wanted to put forward?
Yeah, so I think it's just really important. We weren't able to form government this time. The voters decided that our job was going to be the job of holding the government accountable for its actions. So I think one of the real concerns that I have is that the collective set of policies that the government is putting in place and the cuts that it is making are actually going to push people who are already vulnerable further into poverty. And we're going to see more people struggling with issues like affordable housing, more people struggling to find affordable childcare, more people who are vulnerable to homelessness.
Even our schools are not underfunded.
And the schools are very underfunded, as you know, and even the repairs to schools, to the physical buildings that are falling apart. I mean, as you saw, in Crescent Town, literally the walkway crumbled and there was a hole. Thank God there were no children on it or under it or parents or anybody. Thank God it happened on a Saturday morning. No one was hurt. But that's just an example of and of course that's not the school per se, but nonetheless, there's infrastructure that is crumbling, and money that was supposed $100 million that had been earmarked for those repairs, the government cut. So I think at one level, our job is to keep holding the government accountable and to keep making it uncomfortable for them to sweep this stuff under the rug, which they're trying to do. It's also to help community members become vocal and make their points heard and to amplify their voices. And then also, I think it's very important to be able to lay out to people that there is an alternative, so that 4 years down the road, hopefully, we can become the government and then actually make these changes that we think are so important ourselves.
Okay. The Ontarians or the people of your riding, this time they decided that they will elect you. They did their job, they did their work. So they exercised,
I'm grateful.
and they exercised their power. So that is one part. So now you're elected, you're representing them. So after election, what is their role, or how they can help you to perform well?
Thanks for asking that question. I mean, at one level, I am so grateful that to be representing the people of Beaches-East York. And although I find the work at Queen's Park to be difficult and hostile, every day that I go out in the community, I am supported and buoyed by the just wonderful people that I meet. So I think I love the work in the constituency. As I said, I'm blessed with a wonderful team. And so they are working very hard when people have very specific problems that they need solved. My incredible team is there to help. And then I personally will help any issues that the folk that where my voice particularly is needed. So and then I think so I am helped and supported just by the warmth and the caring of people in the community. And then also I think, and this is where their advocacy and are enabling them to amplify their voices and to help them learn how to organize more effectively so that their voices are heard in the political process. I think that's a really important part of my job, and that also helps us.
Definitely. So we need a concerted efforts, in fact, in the community.
And it has to be something that we all do together, right?
To make any government member or legislative member accountable.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you very much, Rima.
And again, sorry, just I take very seriously this idea that I am a social justice advocate working in politics, because the things that moved me before I started still move me now and are still important. Only now I have a greater responsibility because my voice carries more weight.
Definitely.
So I take that very seriously.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your experience as an MPP and as a social actor. So do you have anything specific to share with your riding,
Well, I actually do. And thank you again so much for having me. I love these conversations because you ask really thoughtful questions that allow us to get beneath the surface of whatever is in the news yesterday or today. And it's always a real treat. So one of the things that I would like to do, and I would love it if your viewers would get involved, is I want to help all of us create a counter narrative to the very narrow perspective that this government is putting forward about as they're changing the social assistance process. So what they've done, for instance, is I think they're rolling back these labor laws, these updated labor laws, cutting planned increases to mental health supports, cutting planned increases to OW and ODSP, all of those sorts of things, not building the kinds of social housing that we need, cutting rent control, all of that sort of stuff is not going to be helpful. And one of the things that the minister keeps saying is the best social program is a job. And the problem with that perspective is that it ignores the kind of barriers that people face
or the equality as well. Yeah.
Exactly. They ignore equity issues. It ignores the fact that poverty is racialized, that poverty is more likely to strike communities that are racialized and marginalized. And so that if we're going to fix that, we need to get at these deep issues. So what I would like to do is to help create the counter narrative by allowing people who've had histories struggling with poverty and or with any of the elements that lead to it, to tell their stories. What were the barriers they faced? Why were they struggling with poverty and or with homelessness? So what we would like to do is to allow people to tell those stories either with a photograph or with a spoken word piece or with a video or with an audio piece or a painting or a drawing or whatever it is that tells the story that they would like to tell. So we're going to be creating a website that will allow people to contribute, and I hope to develop this way to help the community to hold a body of evidence that says these are the complex issues, and that's why saying the best social program is a job doesn't solve the problem. Here are the things that would solve the problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rima. I was about to finish it, but let me just ask you another thing that recently I saw on your Facebook that you have formed a women's group or something. I haven't gone through the whole thing.
I think you might meant the cover, the cover for that was a photograph. Dolly was in it as well, as well as three other amazing MPPs, and it was actually a pushback at Maclean's magazine because they had done a cover saying that the resistance against Trudeau's carbon tax was 5 white men, and the ridiculous thing is that 5 white men cannot be the resistance to the status quo, which is that white men have all the power. So what we did was it was a joke where we put 5 of us really awesome MPPs from the city of Toronto and said, no, this is what the resistance looks like, women of color. But we were just pushing back at Maclean's for its ridiculous Maclean's cover.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's been such a delight to be here and to speak with all of your viewers.
Thank you. Dear viewers, thank you very much for watching our program. We hope that you liked it. If you have any question, you can write us back. You can email us at radio@themetromail.com. We'll talk about something else. We'll bring new guests to our next episode. Until then, please take care and stay well. Thank you. Bye-bye for today.
Bye.